I'm with María Helena Semedo from the FAO. Thank you for the interview. I would like to ask you, what is the importance of the biodiversity for the agriculture?
Biodiversity is very, very important for agriculture. What is biodiversity about? Biodiversity is about the species we have in the world, no? On plants. The species we have in the aquatic environment, the species we have for forests, and all of those species, they contribute to the agriculture and nutrition production. And the challenge we have is the way we are producing, we are destroying the biodiversity. Second, we are not using at the extent of the number of species and varieties we have around the world in such a way that they can be useful to better nutrition, increase food security, and better production. This is one. Second, the way we produce. We need to produce more. We have a population increasing. We have a middle class with different consumption patterns, and we need to feed this population, and on the other side to have for them to have access to the food they are demanding. For this reason, it is important that we preserve biodiversity. On the second side, biodiversity provides what we call ecosystem services. Ecosystem services, if you have trees in a soil, the trees will facilitate that the water enter in the soil and will recharge the aquifers. If you have plants or in the mountains, we can have a purification of water. We have the pollination. The pollination is what? Is the bees, very important to produce fruits or some vegetables. But with the use of pesticides, for instance, we are destroying those animals. Then biodiversity is a reconciliation with all of those varieties, these species, for us human beings, for our communities, in a way that we can produce sustainable and we can produce different. If you are to feed a population of 10 billion by 2050 with the climate change effects, a population with living in the urban areas, we need to preserve biodiversity. We need to use all the extent of all the varieties we have, and we need to use ecosystem services for plant and pest diseases, for water purification, for pollination, and all ecosystem services. This is the reason why we are here. And we are explaining that we need to mainstream biodiversity across agriculture sectors. When I refer to agriculture sector, I'm talking about agriculture, forestry, fisheries, and all the productive sectors.
We are now at the COP13 on biodiversity here in Cancun to talk about the biodiversity, and what is the message of FAO exactly during this COP?
That to preserve biodiversity and to mainstream biodiversity, we cannot have a silos approach. As I said this morning, we need to change the way we do agriculture and we use natural resources. We need to work across ministries. Usually the problem we have, the ministers of environment, they don't talk to the other ministers, they don't work in a cross-sectoral and cross-cutting way. We need to have a more integration among the sectors, the different sectors as I mentioned, and to see how we can have take advantage of the linkages among those sectors. And we need to have more efficiency in the use of those resources and the use we do agriculture and we do agriculture throughout the food systems and the value chain.
And now, also, how can we transform the agriculture production? How can we do it?
Yes, it's redundant to say that we need to do it sustainable, but the sustainable is exactly to have a system or a techniques, and FAO offer several techniques. I refer to agroecology. We have the integration of agriculture and forestry. We have an example of the integration of rice production and in the mangroves, rice and fisheries. All of those integration, this is the better way to produce and to have a more agroecological way of producing in a more sustainable and long-term way. But we need at the government side, we need better policies, we need incentives to stewardship for the fisheries, the focus, the smallholder farmers to take care of the nature, to preserve the nature. And we need appropriate strategies and projects and programs together to have a more sustainable way in agriculture, production and productivity. Because we need to be more, to increase the yields, to produce in a more sustainable, but productivity is very important. Otherwise, we're going to an extensive agriculture, and we need to do a more intensive agriculture.
And what about the production of meat? We know it's the most contaminating part of the agriculture. I would like to know what can we do? How can we transform this sector of the economy?
The FAO message is true that agriculture sector contribute around 30% of the emission of gas, but agriculture sector could be part of the solution, because if you have appropriate practices, we can reduce the emission of gas, and this is our message. In livestock, we have sustainable practices on grazing, on other varieties of seeds for feed, animal feed, that can be less contributing less to the gas emissions. And on the other side, what we said, we cannot see the agriculture sector in isolation. We have to see throughout the landscape. Throughout the landscape is how we have the minus and the plus. Because if we emit, but how we can sink the carbon, how we can sequester the carbon, and at the end maybe we can reach a balance. We cannot have really a sector approach. We need a landscape approach where we have the different interaction among sectors and the human. And this is how FAO really sees the approach in a more integrated and sustainable way.
And finally, as you know, the agenda on development, sustainable development, put some targets on food security and access on water. So, what is the importance of the agriculture, the FAO, and the all this the works we have to do for the food security and the access of water?
As I said this morning, the Agenda 2030 with the targets we have and regarding agriculture and food security is to really eradicate hunger, no? Eradicate hunger meaning that by 2030 no one will be food insecure. Meaning that, as I said, we have to work on the production side, we have to work on the access side, we have to work on the nutritious value of food, because it's not only to have food, but we need to have nutritious food. We have to be sustainable in the way we produce, and we have to be sure that we have access and we use the food for our needs. On the other side, the producers of agriculture, 80% of the food we produce is coming from the smallholder farmers. They are the biggest investor and the producers of food. They are the ones we should invest on. We should help them to produce, to better produce the food, and they are also the most food insecure. They have to produce to the market, they have to increase value in what they produce in such a way that they will increase their incomes and they also be having some wealth and being food secure at the same time.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Maria
you.
Helena, for the interview.
Thank you.